There are a lot of ways to blow an undercover operation, but getting busted by the HOA for a car wrap wasn't one I'd ever planned for. I'd navigated cartel sting operations, infiltrated crime rings in 5 states, and even once hid in a septic truck for 2 days without blinking. But none of that prepared me for the fluorescent orange violation notice fluttering on my windshield like a neon slap in the face. It read, "Non-compliant vehicle appearance, $500 fine." That was it. No warning. No context. Just a fat fine from Karen, president of our beloved Homeowners Association, with a note scribbled on the back. Remove your military-grade wrap immediately or face further penalties. I hadn't laughed that hard since a mob boss offered me Bitcoin for bail. If only she knew she had just picked a fight with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. 6 months earlier, I moved into this neighborhood under the name Chris Dalton. Average guy, quiet, self-employed IT consultant. It was the perfect cover. The house was just 3 doors down from the real target, a man named Russell Denton, suspected of laundering money for an international arms network. My job? Surveillance. I had the SUV rigged with enough listening and tracking gear to make Langley jealous. Everything about it was designed to look boring to the untrained eye. Flat black, no logos, no shine. But apparently to Karen, it screamed visual pollution. The first time I met Karen, she popped out from behind a bush holding a laminated HOA Rules Handbook like it was the Constitution. Blonde bob, permanent scowl, tan vest with way too many zippered pockets, and a name tag that read Community Integrity Officer. She welcomed me with a suspicious glare and a rapid-fire explanation of community standards, trash days, lawn height limits, mailbox decoration codes, and, of course, vehicle aesthetic. "We like to maintain a certain visual harmony," she'd said, eyeing my SUV like it was a nuclear warhead. I gave her a tight smile and told her I'd read the manual. In reality, I burned it the moment I got inside. For the first couple months, she was a minor annoyance. I was too focused on the operation to care. The target worked at strange hours, lots of late-night visitors, encrypted phone calls. I had gear in place to monitor his movements, and every inch of my vehicle was necessary for that mission. But Karen became bolder with time. She'd take photos of my driveway, stand with binoculars behind her hydrangeas, even once walked up and tried to peek into the back window of my vehicle. I had to trigger a fake Bluetooth speaker alarm just to get her to back off. She laughed awkwardly and said she was just checking for neighborhood safety. Then came the notice. The fine wasn't even the funny part. The funniest part was that she scheduled a violation hearing for me at the HOA clubhouse, complete with RSVP instructions, dress code, and a suggested donation for community improvement landscaping. It was absurd. I was midway through a critical surveillance sweep, and this woman wanted me to explain why my vehicle didn't match the aesthetic vibe of the neighborhood. I thought about ignoring it, but then something clicked. If Karen was nosy enough to find me, and bold enough to schedule a meeting, what would she do next? She was getting too close to a federal operation, and if she dug deeper, this could get dangerous, especially for her. So I showed up. Thursday night, 7 p.m. sharp. The HOA clubhouse looked like a Pinterest page exploded inside it. Fairy lights, pastel banners, and a huge poster that said, "Beautify our block." I came in wearing jeans and a polo shirt. Nothing flashy. Just enough to pass as the harmless IT guy Karen believed I was. The meeting started with small talk, then went straight into the charges. Karen stood at a podium with a slideshow ready. Slide 1 was a blurry photo of my SUV. Slide 2 was a close-up with some red arrows pointing at my mat wrap. "This vehicle," she announced to the room of about 20 neighbors, "violates Article 4, Section B of the HOA Handbook, regarding unauthorized surface modifications." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. A man in khakis with a Bluetooth headset chimed in about how the black wrap felt militaristic. A lady next to him muttered something about unsettling vibes. Then came Karen's zinger. It looks like a government vehicle. And frankly, I think it might be. The room gasped. My heart skipped a beat, not because I was scared, but because she wasn't wrong. Just far too right for her own good. I responded calmly, shrugging like someone who bought their SUV off Craigslist and got a discount on a weird wrap job. It came like that, I said. Figured it'd grow on people. That only irritated her more. She pounded her gavel, which she apparently carried in her tote bag, and declared I had 10 days to comply or face escalating fines and potential towing. Back at my house, I sat in the mobile ops van parked in my garage and flipped through footage from the clubhouse. I'd planted a hidden mic in my shirt just in case. My partner Cruz was on the line, cracking up as he listened in. Man, only you could be in the middle of an international arms sting and get busted by a neighborhood watch grandma with a god complex. I grinned. She's not just a grandma. She's the gatekeeper of the gates of suburbia. And she just declared war. But Cruz wasn't laughing for long. The next morning, he called with a tone I'd never heard from him before. Hey, you need to secure that SUV. Like, right now. I was already confused when he added, the local impound lot just got a call from your HOA. They've scheduled a private tow. Your ride's about to get snatched. I sprinted outside. The SUV was still in my driveway, but not for long. A tow truck had turned onto the street. Karen was standing beside it, clipboard in hand, pointing directly at my house. I ducked behind my neighbor's hedge and spoke quickly into my mic. We're compromised. I'm initiating fallback plan B. And Cruz, I hesitated. Get ready to brief the director. We just got HOA'd. The tow truck crept forward like a slow-moving tank, its hazard lights blinking an eerie warning that no one else on the block seemed to notice. I crouched behind the hedge, still in my morning clothes, adrenaline spiking like I was breaching a compound. Except this wasn't a cartel compound or terrorist cell. It was a sleepy suburban cul-de-sac in the middle of nowhere, and the biggest threat to my entire federal surveillance operation was a woman with a clipboard and a taste for HOA drama. Karen stood next to the tow truck driver, arms crossed, her mouth moving a mile a minute as she pointed at my surveillance SUV like it was a stolen vehicle. In a way it was, just not in the way she imagined. I activated my emergency override from my watch. The SUV's engine was programmed to block ignition unless my biometric signature was present. Any attempt to hotwire or tow the vehicle would trigger a silent alarm to our field office. The truck driver, a balding guy with oil-stained jeans and a tired face, approached the SUV cautiously. He glanced at Karen, clearly unsure about the situation. She waved him on, barking something about community bylaws and vehicle compliance. I could see his hesitation. This was not a typical repossession job. He knew it too. Before he could lower the lift, I stood up from behind the hedge and walked toward them. Calm, collected, but not smiling. I needed to handle this like an annoyed civilian, not a federal agent. Karen's eyes widened when she saw me. Mr. Dalton, she said, her voice sugary and fake, you received multiple notices. This is your final warning. The board voted. Your vehicle is being removed per Section 4, Paragraph 12 of the Neighborhood Compliance Policy. She said it like she was quoting scripture. I'm sorry, but you can't just tow a car without a proper legal order, I said, keeping my voice level. That's private property. The tow truck driver looked between us, clearly wanting no part of this drama. Ma'am, he said hesitantly, if the owner's present and objects, I legally can't tow it unless there's a court order or it's in a no-parking zone. This ain't either. Karen bristled. I'll have your company license revoked, she snapped. We have a contract with the HOA. He's in violation of our codes. The driver shrugged, already backing off. Then get a judge to sign it. I ain't towing a guy's ride just 'cause you don't like the color. She turned her fury back to me. You think you're clever? You're not above the rules. I met her stare without blinking. I think you're dangerously close to harassment, I said. Now, unless you want to be cited for trespassing, I suggest you leave my property. I've documented everything." That part wasn't a lie. The entire interaction was being recorded on the body cam clipped inside my collar, and Cruz was watching it all from our satellite van. Karen stormed off in a flurry of insults about entitled renters and outsiders ruining the neighborhood. The tow truck rolled away a moment later. I waited until the coast was clear before heading into the garage and locking everything down. Inside, the mobile surveillance station hummed quietly. Monitors showed multi-angle feeds of the target's house. Nothing unusual there, yet. I sat down at the console and patched into the encrypted line. Cruz's face appeared on screen, equal parts amused and stressed. "She really tried to tow an FBI vehicle," he said, shaking his head. "That has to be a first." I leaned back. "She's escalating. If she gets any bolder, she might trip one of the sensors around the perimeter. That'll trigger a full op lockdown." Cruz nodded. "We can't afford that. The Denton case is heating up. Intel says he's expecting a package tonight, could be the final piece we need." "You sure she won't cause trouble again?" I wasn't. In fact, I was certain she would. Karen wasn't the kind of person to back down. She'd tasted the illusion of authority, and now she wanted more. The rest of the day was tense. I stayed in the garage, monitoring the feed and updating my field report. Around 4 p.m., something caught my attention. On one of the outside perimeter cams, I saw Karen and 2 other HOA board members standing near the edge of my driveway. They were pointing at my van. One of them held a notepad, scribbling down something. Another was taking photos with a phone. They didn't step onto my property yet, but it was clear they were planning something. I had to move first. That night, I took the SUV out and drove it to a secure lot a few miles away. We had a backup vehicle there, an identical-looking model with zero surveillance tech, just in case. I parked the decoy in my driveway and returned on foot under the cover of darkness. By morning, the trap was set. If Karen wanted to keep pushing, she'd be messing with a decoy, and we'd catch her doing it. The following morning, just after dawn, I got the confirmation. The motion-triggered cam near the rear of the SUV lit up. Karen was crouching behind the bumper, trying to peel up a portion of the wrap with a pocket knife. Her hands shook as she tugged at the edge, mumbling about hidden cameras and tracking devices. I almost felt bad for her, almost. But she had crossed a line now. Tampering with what she believed was a private vehicle? That was a criminal offense. I alerted Cruz, and within minutes, we had agents prepping a soft intervention. No arrests yet, but enough to scare her straight. We needed her off the board, off the case, and far away from Denton before she screwed everything up. Meanwhile, I sent a package to the HOA office. An anonymous letter with legal language so dense it would take a team of attorneys to unravel. It simply stated, "Interference with federally secured vehicles or agents, intentional or otherwise, may result in civil penalties and criminal prosecution under Title 18, Section 111. Karen wouldn't know what hit her. But by the look on her face as she was caught on camera, breaking into what she thought was an illegal vehicle, I knew we were only one step away from the final act. She thought she was the neighborhood's moral compass. She didn't realize she'd just wandered into a live operation sanctioned by the United States government. And I wasn't just going to let that go. If she wanted war, she was going to get a lesson in federal jurisdiction, the hard way. Karen didn't show up at the community park barbecue that weekend, which was the first sign something had rattled her. Normally she'd be at the center of everything, clipboard in hand, policing the recycling bins and criticizing someone's plastic cutlery. But that Saturday she was nowhere to be seen. I knew why. Cruz had made sure the letter reached her mailbox early that morning, and judging by the HOA group chat I'd managed to quietly infiltrate, the fallout had already begun. Messages were flying back and forth between board members. "Did you see what Karen did? She tampered with his vehicle? Wait, is he suing?" She hadn't responded to a single one. silent, for the first time since I moved in. It was beautiful. Still, silence didn't mean surrender. I knew Karen too well by now. People like her didn't back down. They regrouped. They plotted. She wasn't licking her wounds, she was looking for an angle. Which meant I needed to stay 2 steps ahead. The problem was, Denton, my actual target, was heating up too. That night, Cruz forwarded me a flagged call recording. Denton had placed an encrypted voice message through a burner cell to someone in Eastern Europe. It was short and coded, but it ended with a chilling sentence. The hardware is in play. Move on Tuesday. Tuesday was 3 days away. That gave me a narrow window to finalize surveillance, track the shipment, and prepare a coordinated takedown. And I had to do all of it while dodging an HOA president with delusions of power and a growing vendetta. Cruz wanted to pull me. Said it was getting too hot, too unpredictable. But I told him no. I had a plan. And Karen was going to be a part of it, whether she liked it or not. On Monday morning, I received a new letter. It was shoved into my doorframe, half crumpled, no envelope. At the top, in capital letters, it read, Notice of Community Violation Escalation. Beneath that, a bullet list of infractions, including hostile vehicle presence, non-disclosure of vehicle purpose, and my personal favorite, intentional refusal to beautify property. At the bottom, in shaky cursive, Karen had written, If you do not comply within 48 hours, the HOA will initiate full towing protocol and legal escalation. I read it twice and then laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Legal escalation? Against who? She still didn't realize what she was dealing with. But if she wanted escalation, she was going to get it, just not the way she expected. That afternoon, I prepped the decoy SUV for the final trap. We swapped the plates for fake government surplus tags, installed a temporary GPS bug inside the bumper, just enough to ping movement if someone tried to move or open it. And best of all, I loaded the glove box with a set of classified-looking documents marked with big, red confidential stamps. They were fake, of course. Pages of old case studies, redacted nonsense, and doctored surveillance photos. But to someone like Karen, they'd look like proof of a conspiracy. I didn't have to wait long. That night, just past midnight, the driveway camera caught movement. Karen, dressed in black with a beanie on her head like she was some kind of suburban ninja, crept toward the SUV. She had a flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. She looked around nervously before crouching near the rear wheel. She clipped the backup camera wiring, then moved to the driver's side and tried to jimmy the door. It was locked, of course, but the glove box wasn't. When she eventually pried the door open with a slim jim, the internal proximity alert went off on my phone. I watched in real time as she opened the glove compartment and froze. Her eyes widened. She flipped through the pages. You could practically see the gears turning in her head. She thought she'd found something big, something illegal, and she was going to expose it to save the community. At 8 a.m. sharp the next morning, I received a knock on my door. Not a polite knock. The kind of knock you use when you want everyone on the block to hear. I opened it to find 2 HOA board members, Karen standing behind them like a stage director, arms crossed and eyes blazing. The man in front, Steve, I think, held a printed copy of the fake documents. Mr. Dalton, he said, puffing up his chest, we need to talk about the contents of your vehicle. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the SUV you tried to tow illegally last week? Steve cleared his throat. We believe your vehicle is being used in violation of multiple community standards, and possibly federal law. Karen has presented evidence that you are involved in surveillance activities. I didn't blink. Surveillance? I repeated, feigning confusion. Like neighborhood watch? Karen shoved past Steve and waved a plastic folder in my face. You're spying on people. We have documents, map, photos. This entire block could be under surveillance right now. She turned to the others. I say we call a special meeting. Today. Emergency vote. We expel him from the HOA and turn everything over to the local news. Let the community see what kind of danger he's bringing into our homes. I smiled. Great idea. Let's do that. That threw her off. I invited them all to meet at the clubhouse at noon. Said I'd bring all my paperwork and proof of registration. They agreed, clearly expecting a public takedown. But what they didn't know was that Cruz had just secured a federal warrant based on Denton's latest movements, and that meant we had full jurisdiction to remove obstacles to the operation, including self-appointed neighborhood cops. At noon, the HOA board, half the neighborhood, and Karen in her Sunday best assembled at the clubhouse. They had projectors, printed flyers, even a handmade sign that read, "No more spies." Karen took the stage and began her dramatic monologue about invasion of privacy and preserving suburban integrity. She waved around the fake documents like a trophy. Then she turned to me and said, "Mr. Dalton, would you care to explain what exactly your vehicle is doing parked in our community?" I stepped forward, pulled a black folder from my bag, and placed it on the podium. Inside was a letter signed by the Assistant Director of the FBI, confirming my undercover role, and a heavily redacted version of our operation's scope, just enough to prove legitimacy without compromising details. Karen's voice cracked as she read it aloud. The room went silent. I let it sink in before speaking. "I've been conducting a lawful surveillance operation targeting an international arms smuggler living 3 doors down. Your interference nearly compromised that operation. But fortunately, we have measures in place for these kinds of complications." Karen looked like she might pass out. Steve just sat down, pale as a ghost. Someone in the back muttered, "Holy hell." I turned to leave but paused at the door. "Oh," I said casually, "about the SUV? It's government property. Tampering with it is a federal crime. Just a heads up." I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I already knew that Clubhouse would never feel the same to Karen again. The clubhouse remained frozen in silence long after I left, like the echo of that reveal had glued everyone's mouths shut. Karen didn't follow me out, and none of the board members tried to save face. They sat there, stunned, staring at a folder that had just upended their power trip. That moment should have ended it all, should have been the climax. But in true Karen fashion, she wasn't done. Public humiliation only made her more dangerous. Cornered animal lashes out. A cornered Karen? That's a full-blown suburban meltdown. And sure enough, before the day was over, she found a new angle, one that took the entire situation to a place even I hadn't expected. Cruz called me an hour later, voice tight. "You're not gonna like this," he said. She called the local news. Claimed a rogue government agent has been conducting illegal surveillance and intimidating the HOA. They're running it tonight. I sat back in my chair, rubbing my eyes. Of course she did. Cruz continued, "Worse, she leaked one of the fake documents you planted. She thinks she's exposed a deep state conspiracy. They're quoting her as a whistleblower." I exhaled slowly, annoyed but also amused. We're in conspiracy theory territory now. Cruz didn't laugh. "This could force us to reveal more than we want. Denton's moving tomorrow. If we're going to finish this quietly, we need to neutralize the HOA problem now. Not after." I knew what he meant. We couldn't afford more media attention. If the news started snooping around the block, Denton might get spooked and disappear. Worse, if the media caught even a glimpse of the real SUV or the gear inside the van, it could blow operations across several states. This was no longer about Karen's ego. This was about operational survival. And we were down to less than 24 hours. So I did what any logical federal agent would do when facing an HOA insurgency. I threw a party. I printed flyers that afternoon titled "Neighborhood Appreciation Mixer," complete with drinks, snacks, and a surprise announcement. I slipped them into mailboxes, including Karen's. The catch? I listed the host as Community Services Liaison, Federal Operations Division, which was just vague enough to sound official but non-threatening. My goal wasn't to win them over. It was to redirect the narrative before the media circus rolled in. Cruz thought I was crazy, but I reminded him, people trust what they see more than what they hear. If I could show the neighborhood that I was no threat, just another guy with a job and a clipboard, maybe I could neutralize Karen's paranoia once and for all. That evening, people actually showed up. At first in trickles, then in steady group. There were drinks on folding tables, a barbecue smoking in my driveway, and light music playing from Bluetooth speakers. I wore a polo shirt and khakis, looking every bit the off-duty analyst. I chatted with neighbors about local restaurants, HOA trivia, even fantasy football. It was surreal, watching people who had glared at me just days ago now ask if I needed help setting up chairs. Human psychology is weird like that. Karen arrived late, of course, wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf like she was hiding from the paparazzi. She stood across the lawn like a protester at a parade, arms crossed, clearly waiting for me to slip up. She didn't approach until I made my surprise announcement, gathering everyone on the front yard for a quick speech. I kept it short and vague. I just wanted to thank everyone for being so patient while I've navigated some complicated work stuff. I know there's been confusion. But trust me, everything I've done here has been within the boundaries of the law and intended to protect the people in this neighborhood. I nodded politely, then added, and as of tomorrow, that work will be done. There was a light round of applause. People clinked plastic cup. Someone offered to bring out dessert. Karen, however, pushed through the group and stepped right up to me. Her voice was low and sharp. You think this changes anything? I looked at her calmly. It changes everything, I said. Because I'm leaving. And you? You just publicly harassed a federal officer on camera. You called the news and shared fabricated document. You tampered with federal property. And now that I've completed my assignment, guess what I get to do next? She paled. What? I smiled. Paperwork. A full report. Every incident. Every false claim. And that report goes on record. Which means if anything else like this ever happens, if you threaten another agent, interfere with another case, you'll be flagged nationwide. I leaned in slightly. No HOA will want you after that. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her eyes darted around at the people watching. No one stepped in. Her power was unraveling in real time. But she still wasn't done. That night, after the party ended, she made one last move. Around midnight, the security cam outside the decoy SUV caught her sneaking onto my driveway again. This time, she had a small toolkit and what looked like a thumb drive. She climbed into the front seat. How she unlocked it, I still don't know, and plugged the drive into the diagnostic port below the steering column. She was trying to extract data. But she didn't know that port didn't connect to anything real. It was a dummy plug that triggered a motion sensor inside the van, which silently alerted Cruz. 10 minutes later, she was met by two very real, very calm federal agents who walked her off my driveway. They didn't cuff her. They didn't need to. A formal warning was enough. A copy of the warrant authorizing surveillance on Denton was handed to her on the spot, with a stern reminder that further interference would escalate the issue to federal court. Karen didn't say a word as she was escorted back across the street. She looked stunned, like the entire foundation of her self-importance had finally cracked. I watched from the window as she stood on her porch, shaking, clutching the paper like it was a death notice. Then, for the first time since I'd moved in, she went inside and shut her door without slamming it. The next morning, we wrapped the operation. Denton made his move just as expected, and Cruz's team intercepted him 2 blocks over with enough evidence to put him away for decade. I stayed behind only long enough to pack up the equipment and load it into the official transport. As the van rolled out, I stood by the curb, watching the neighborhood return to its ordinary rhythm. Lawns being mowed, dogs being walked, mailboxes being checked. Karen watched from her window. She didn't wave. Neither did I. But I left her with one final souvenir, tucked gently into her mailbox. A printed copy of the fake documents she'd used, now stamped in bold red letters. Operation complete. Thank you for your unwitting participation. Beneath it, a smiley face sticker. Not for mockery. For closure. After all, every mission has its unsung heroes. And sometimes, those heroes come wrapped in a cardigan with a clipboard and far too much time on their hands. The quiet that followed my departure was the kind of peace Karen had always claimed to protect, yet never truly allowed. I didn't have to stick around to watch the aftermath. Cruz and the rest of the team handled the wrap-up while I was already en route to our next assignment, but I did check in a few weeks later out of curiosity. Karen hadn't spoken to the press again. The story she fed to the news station fizzled out after a retraction was issued, courtesy of some very persuasive calls from Federal Public Affairs. Her 15 minutes of imagined whistleblower fame evaporated without fanfare, and just like that, her HOA kingdom began to crumble. Not because anyone brought it down, but because no one took her seriously anymore. According to a contact in the field who stayed embedded in the region, the board quietly suspended her from all leadership activities. No vote. No ceremony. They simply stopped CCING her on internal communications. A new interim president was chosen, someone less dramatic, more focused on cracked sidewalks and potholes than spy conspiracies. Karen tried to rally supporters, even attempted to start a petition to remove the infiltrators, but the community had seen too much. The neighbors who once feared her clipboard now looked away when she walked by. A few brave ones even laughed under their breath. Cruz sent me a snapshot that said everything I needed to know. It was taken at the community mailbox center. Karen, arms crossed, stood beneath a freshly installed bulletin board. The message posted in bold lettering read, "As a reminder, no resident may tamper with vehicles on private property. Violators may be subject to civil and federal penalties." Below that was a smaller sign that read, "Let's keep the neighborhood safe, not suspicious." It was a clear jab at her, put there not by the FBI, but by the residents themselves. But what really stayed with me wasn't her fall. It was how close she had come to blowing everything. One overly curious woman with too much time and a distorted sense of justice nearly collapsed a year-long operation involving international arms dealers, encrypted financial transfers, and a network that stretched across 3 continents. All because she didn't like the color of my SUV. We always build contingency plans for interference. Natural disasters, technical failures, even crooked local authorities. But nobody trains you for HOA entanglement. Nobody teaches you what to do when the most dangerous variable in a national security op is a retired librarian with a Bluetooth headset and a vendetta about mailbox paint shade. After Denton's arrest, the agency issued a brief internal memo outlining the unusual circumstances that nearly compromised the mission. The report was circulated across departments and later used in a training scenario. They even gave it a name, Operation Suburban Storm. I couldn't help but laugh when I saw it included a redacted transcript of Karen's outburst during the HOA meeting and a screenshot of her trying to pry open the SUV's glove box with a screwdriver. Somewhere, deep in an FBI server, Karen is immortalized as a cautionary tale, unlabeled but unforgettable. Back at headquarters, Cruz and I debriefed over lukewarm coffee in the operations lounge. He leaned back in his chair and smirked. "You know, if she hadn't gone nuclear, we might have finished the job cleanly without half the stress." I nodded. "Maybe. But honestly, her chaos might have sped things up." Denton got nervous when he saw her poking around. It forced him to move early. That gave us the opening we needed. Cruz shook his head. "So what you're saying is, we owe her?" I grinned. "I'm saying Karen might have actually helped without meaning to. And that, my friend, is the scariest part of this whole story." The files were closed. The operation was listed as a success with minor complications. I moved on to the next case, a new identity, a new town. But some things stick with you no matter how many aliases you adopt. Every time I drive through a quiet neighborhood now, I find myself glancing at community bulletin boards, checking for laminated rule sheets, wondering if there's another Karen lurking behind a potted fern, waiting to protect the world from unapproved car wrap. But sometimes I smile. Because I know Karen will never forget what happened. I know that even now, when a black SUV rolls into her neighborhood, she probably stiffens, squints at the windows, and wonders if the feds are back. I know she still tells the story, her version, of course, where she was the one who exposed a government scandal, not the woman who tried to break into a surveillance van with a flathead screwdriver and nearly ended up in federal court. One last detail stands out from the wrap-up phase. Before I left town, I sent a package to the HOA office under an anonymous name. Inside was a small wooden plaque. On it, carved neatly, were the words, "Karen for President, just not of this neighborhood." No note, no signature. But they hung it up on the community board anyway. Whether out of irony, pettiness, or reluctant humor, I'll never know. But I like to think it serves as a reminder to everyone who reads it. Sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones who never look powerful. And sometimes, the loudest ones in the room are only dangerous until they meet someone louder with a badge and federal jurisdiction. I didn't leave with bitterness. I left with perspective. Karen didn't ruin the mission. She just added a chapter to it. A messy, chaotic, occasionally hilarious chapter filled with overreactions, conspiracy theories, and passive-aggressive lawn signs. But she gave the neighborhood something to talk about, and she gave the FBI something to laugh about, which, in this line of work, isn't as common as you might think. Somewhere out there, Karen is still walking her neighborhood, still enforcing rules nobody remembers writing, still carrying a clipboard. But maybe, just maybe, she checks the license plates a little more carefully now. Maybe she thinks twice before accusing someone of running a spy op based on matte paint. And maybe, when she sees an unmarked vehicle with tinted windows, she doesn't reach for her phone. She just pulls her blinds closed and whispers to herself, "Not today." And that's good enough for me.